back with deep images, and we have a very special session we want to do tonight. Um, and we are going to do two parts, two sessions, and make it one long playlist that you can watch for hours and hours. It's called Cult TV, and Cult TV is something kind of like when we did alternative sci-fi films that we come up with a workable definition for ourselves. Like, what are the parameters? Like, of course, what movies and shows can we not talk about, and what can we talk about? What should we talk about? What's our definition? So we're not like a big mainstream show. So, we had, in all frankness, and I won't linger on this, but we had an applicant into our show who was upset about our alternative sci-fi pick because he just wanted to just pick a sci-fi movie he liked. And I said, well, that's not the topic though. Any other time. And I said, we have talked about Planet of the Apes. We have talked about I Am Legend. I'm not against Planet of the Apes, but we're trying to talk about sci-fi that's not multi-billion dollar franchises. So in that same spirit, we're not going to be talking about Seinfeld. We're not going to be, I have a list of them. We're not going to be talking about Seinfeld, Cheers, Frasier, Friends, MASH, All in the Family, The Jeffersons, ER, House, West Wing, Game of Thrones, or Stranger Things. No matter what their individual merits are, or in at least half the cases, in my opinion, aren't. The other half I think are great, but they just don't fit into this under this rubric. So I hope that makes sense to everyone watching, because it's when people want to join our channel, I'm noticing, and it usually doesn't work out. And this is one of the reasons they always ask me these questions, and when they don't understand, then I know they're kind of on a different page. So, but I know our viewers are all like just ready for us to talk about. So Cult TV, it's going to be any of the following. So any television productions, a regular television series, primetime, network, daytime, cable, streaming, miniseries, limited series, special presentations, TV movies from any time period, any country, any genre, but not mainstream, not commercial, as in distribution, as in oversaturation in the media. There's some that some of us here will enjoy a lot that are just in this space are everywhere right now, and may be for a long time. And we when we find borderline ones, we talk it out. And if one of us can make a case to the others that, hey, I have something extra to bring to the table to this, then I'm gonna be like, okay, yeah, we'll bend the rule a little bit. So, my favorite show of all time is Twin Peaks. I live Twin Peaks. We covered Twin Peaks cursorily on Horror TV. We didn't intend to, but someone mentioned it and I got to talking, and then Bill pointed out, well, you pretty much just covered it. So that's why I put a picture of
I
Laura
think that was
Palmer.
me actually, because I was just like, oh man,
It
you
was
have to
you,
talk
yeah.
about the like theory that you
No,
told
we
me the other
mentioned
day
that
because it was
too.
so
Yes,
cool.
we did mention on anti-heroes. And Laura Palmer
Yes,
is an anti-heroine of her own story. And
absolutely. I love
um,
that.
so I'm not going to do Twin Peaks, but Twin Peaks is to me the definition of my definition, working definition we're going to use today, of something that's cult TV, because it functions in a couple of ways. So let me read something that I wrote just a little while ago that I ran by the gang. Think about some past, not all of this, some of it will be new to y'all. The past shows, for instance, that have been derided as like the worst shows ever made, and they disappeared. Okay, so I'm just gonna name some weird ones. My Mother the Car, A Year at the Top, which I personally liked because it had Satan in it, and
Mhm.
Super Train. Now all of these could conceivably have a cult now. So what I wrote was the ubiquity of all mass media in the age of YouTube and streaming services can give these shows access to many more people than ever thought possible, further blurring these lines between what's, mainstream, what's cult. So is it the distribution? Is it how many people see it? If that's the only metric, then it's tricky right now. Because potentially a million people could see our show. Hopefully they will, but who knows? Um, but theoretically, yeah. So what mine are content, context, and intent. So if the content is something that is not intended to be palatable to the masses from its inception, by its very being, even within a genre, then that alone means it could form a cult around it. Anything within a greater context, as in, say, it is a show that was on for one season 50 years ago. Maybe a lot of people watched it for that one season, but like a lot of movies, now no one knows what the hell it is unless they bump it on YouTube. We went through this with films, that have resurfaced. There's always kind of that strange line, and then the other thing is intent. So if the creators are intending to create a work of art rather than art of commerce, or I should say art over commerce, not necessarily ruling out commerce, such as David Lynch. And then, yes, a cult will invariably grow around that kind of material because it speaks to a niche that's not being spoken to by everyone else. And I'm going to go ahead and read a tiny sample of an incredible book that I'm sure at least two of us, maybe more, have read, that I read to someone recently who asked me, who wanted to be on the show, who asked me, what is cult TV? And I said, let me just read you what Danny Perry wrote in 1981 about cult movies. When you speak of cult movies, you speak in extremes. Hardcore cultists, ranging from polite to lunatic, insist that their favorite films are the most intriguing, unusual, outrageous, mysterious, absurd, daring, entertaining, erotic, exotic, and/or best films of all time. Also, they point out that cult films differ radically from standard Hollywood films in that they characteristically feature atypical heroes and heroines, offbeat dialogue, surprising plot resolutions, highly original storylines, brave themes, often of a sexual or political nature, definitive performances by stars who have cult status, and the novel handling of popular but stale genres. Also contributing are outstanding special effects, spectacular camera work, and a willingness by the filmmaker to experiment. These distinguish many cult films. And so I really think it's just something that has a vision that's not going to speak to everybody. It never will, maybe nor should it, or maybe never meant to. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to talk about. So that we personally love and think are interesting, want to share. Some of them you've heard of, some you won't, because a couple I had never heard of until these nice folks brought them to me. But that was a good sign. So, so we're going to talk about this a little later. Justin Cotton is going to be joining us live from Australia. Right now we've got we've got Bill Mulligan, we've got C.F. Roberts, and Kaylin Ireland, our wonderful co-producer, and we're back in business after being away for a bit as a cast. Some of us did the interview with Toby Poser and John Adams, which is up by the time you see this. Please watch it. Please like it. Share it with everyone in the world.
Sorry, I missed that.
It's okay.
But I bet you guys did a great job.
You'll appreciate it.
It was fun. You're definitely gonna love it.
Yeah, it was a trip. There are people. That's all I'm gonna
very
much
in
the best way possible. Then after that, we recorded a session on X-Men '97, the recent animated show on Disney Plus. Bill was not able to make it, unfortunately. So it came down to what I really shy away from ever doing, is starting a show with only three of us. But it was me, Keith Howell, and Tim Tolbert. So if you're going to start with three people, you might as well start with three people who, know almost as much about comic books as me and Bill do. But Keith might know more. Tim's young. He's catching up, though. He's got great taste, and we really covered some heavy stuff. I mean, when I say heavy, I mean very detailed, a lot of information. And Tim was not able to make the entire session. He had to leave just slightly early. So me and Keith we dug deep. Some of the deepest this channel's ever dug into allegory coded within something like the X-Men. And we've never talked about, I've never talked about the X-Men at all on this channel, in any show I've done. And I grew up with it. So, yeah, so look forward to that too. Put likes on that too and share it. So
I mean, I'm personally looking forward to watching it just because I didn't participate because I have not yet watched the show. It's on
but
my
you'll get it. Yeah,
I'm excited for it.
You know the characters. You'll definitely get it. And the allegory stuff is very. That show manages to be completely nostalgic for people who grew up on that anime show, which I didn't. Neither did Keith. Keith did watch it first run. I watched it syndication in the 2000s. Tim grew up on it, for instance. Kaylin, you and Tim were both very young when it was on. So those people are like, yes, but it's totally modern. Even though it takes place in 1997, it's about 2024. It's about our political landscape, our cultural landscape, and it's not afraid. It doesn't pull a single punch whatsoever. It's got humor, it's got action, it's bright, it's very anime influenced, much more Japanese influence than the original series. I mean that in the very best of ways. For anybody who doesn't like anime, this will probably change your mind and seek out stuff that looks along these lines.
And boy, do I have a rant about people not liking anime. It's like, you just haven't watched enough yet. There's something out there.
Me and Keith had this discussion during the X-Men panel, so we did represent the viewpoints on it, because he brought that up, and he said, I don't like all anime, and I said, well, anime is not a genre, it's a medium. So no one is asking you to like all anime or manga, or comics or books.
I don't like all of it. I'm a big fan. It's a type of media that I enjoy a lot, but I don't like all of it,
Exactly. And the thing is, once you're into something that deeply, as with any subgenre, same with the medium, then you start to see when the novelty wears off, and that's when you start to realize what is the very best of this genre. Say, like I've watched 300 spaghetti westerns. So the first like 50, you're like, oh wow, these are spaghetti westerns. They're so cool and violent and cool music. Then you watch 50 more, and you're like, oh god, those last 50 like ran together and kind of were bad. So then you keep going. So once you get to 300, you're like, I know the masterpieces, I know the ones that suck, and then I know the ones that are kind of in the middle, which are most of them, which are like comfort food to me. And I'm the same way with kung fu films, same with blaxploitation films, as y'all probably know from our last giant topic. And but that's just a matter of exploration. So we're here to give you information and help you learn about this stuff. If you don't know about it, if you know about it, compare opinions and let us know what you think about it. So we're actually going to start with an anime. We're going to start with the very first color anime that ever screened in the United States, and the second anime that ever screened ever in the United States. So that's Kimba the White Lion. So this show started in 1966, and it was produced by a company called Mushi. Mushi, I guess would probably be a better pronunciation in Japanese. Mushi. And so that was created by us, and it's taken me years to get used to pronouncing his name correctly. Everybody calls him Osamu Tezuka, but that's just what us Americans say. I'm pretty sure it's Osamu Tezuka. So Tezuka, that's what I'm going to call him. If anybody wants, any Japanese people watching, please correct me. But Tezuka is considered the godfather of manga. So he's kind of like the Jack Kirby of Japan. And he started not very long after Jack Kirby, actually. Kimba the White Lion started as a comic book long before Jack Kirby came up with the Marvel Universe. And the funny thing about Japanese culture and comics is people of all walks of life, wherever they were, their home, park, subway, they were reading Kimba the White Lion out in the open, adults, in 1951. So they were quite a few decades ahead of us on this track. And so Tezuka is best known for creating Astro Boy, or Tetsuwan Atamu, which was the little boy robot. He's always a boy, and that came to America as Astro Boy in 64, I believe, and that was black and white. And that one was a Mushi production that had been picked up by NBC. But NBC was so impressed with how it did, and I guess the relatability they had with kids, and it was dubbed, and some of the names were changed, including the main character, and forever known as just Astro Boy. But like the names of a lot of the characters were changed into more anglicized names, usually punny names, like he was a fat guy, he'd have like lard in his name, or something just totally inappropriate nowadays. But for little kids. A close friend of mine just told me that a close friend of the show, Tim McLean, just told me that he has never seen Kimba, but he, unlike myself, because he's several years older than me, grew up on Astro Boy, and he still loves it and thinks it holds up today. And I was like, all right, then watch Kimba. All right, so
yes,
Kimba was hard to watch where I live, in the state where Bill and I reside. Some towns had it and some didn't. In the 60s, Charlotte never had Kimba the White Lion, but oddly, this burg near here called Gastonia did for a while. That was in syndication. First run. First run, I don't think it played. It may not have played anywhere in North Carolina. I know it played in the big markets, or what were the big markets then? Now Charlotte is considered a big market, but so I never saw Kimba as a kid. I did see Astro Boy reruns in syndication. I saw maybe 3 episodes, and then they stopped showing it. But I did. So the anime that I grew up on was the syndicated versions of Ultraman, which originally came out in the 60s in Japan. This is not Ultra Q, the very first series, the black and white series, in which Ultraman isn't actually a character, but it's all the same universe. Finally saw that series, and it is fucking incredible. That started in 65. But Ultraman proper started in 66, the color one with the superhero. And of course, there's been a million iterations, but that classic one was shown here dubbed, when I was a child, and I watched it every day. And
Henry.
Yeah.
Just curious, did they show Marine Boy?
Not here.
No, I love
Marine Boy. Awesome. Yeah, I love Marine Boy.
I was not familiar with Marine Boy for quite some time, but
neither. I saw it at a comic convention, the tapes.
We visited relatives in Hawaii, and they were watching it, and so it was like, oh wow, I've never seen this one before.
It's wild how other countries or other cultures embrace some of the animated stuff, because like for a long time, if you went into any Hispanic restaurant, they were playing Dragon Ball Z. And I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, is it bigger?
Wow.
And I asked them, I'm like, is it bigger in Mexico than it is here? And they're like, oh yeah, way bigger. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that's cool.
It's
Um,
bigger around the world than it was here.
and it got pretty big here. It's just
Yeah, it did.
we pick up on things late in America. We have to like co-opt it and dumb it down a little bit and
We
make sure people are
do.
ready for it. Are they ready for Kimba? I don't know if anyone's still ready for Kimba. Kimba is still a radical show thematically.
Boy, and they dumbed it down. They dumbed it down quite a bit.
Well, yes,
And,
Kimba has a plagiaristic remake that I think dumbing down would be kind of the most. I mean, I wrote an article. I'll give a visual aid. So this is a magazine that I used to write for called I Magazine, and it was based in Raleigh, North Carolina, but it was a national distributed magazine. You could get it at any Barnes and Noble or Borders. And I noticed it was in Raleigh, so it wouldn't cost as much to call them on the phone. That's how long ago this was, right?
Mhm.
And so I started writing for them, and I got my friend Bill White, who a founder of the channel. Leave it at that. Co-founder of the channel, Bill White, was writing for Video Eyeball. Bill got me a gig at Video Eyeball, so I got him a gig at I. So Bill is actually in the issue I'm picking up too, and actually Bill's article is about someone he and I both knew that we're going to cover in the next Black Cinema series, Jamal Fanaka. Bill wrote actually Bill's article answers an enormous amount of questions many years ahead of time that Kaylin posed to me about the industry and representation. And Jamal was taking this shit to court literally in the 1990s. He was suing Hollywood over Black representation. He was suing the Directors Guild directly. Now, he's no longer with us. He did not win his case. He and I had many hours of phone conversations about it. So we'll get to that when we get back into Black Cinema. So better watch that too. This is a picture of Jamal, by the way. I love this man.
Yep.
R.I.P. Jamal. And that's Bill's
Soul Vengeance. Wow.
Yeah, no, that's coming. You already know that. This is my
Coin a
Kimba
phrase.
article, Pillaging Kimba. So this the editor wrote this. Henry Covert on the story of the Little White Lion. And then he says the retro cartoon based on a Japanese manga was so good it was stolen in the end. So I made the case, not so much that, I made the case of how it was plagiarized. And I went case by case, for The Lion King. I don't think we've even mentioned the movie by name yet. But it's this obscure.
And Disney's
unheard of
going to
movie.
nuke our channel. What?
Yeah, it's been nice knowing you.
Yeah, see you. But The Lion King, yes, is very much a uncredited plagiarization. Tezuka's company Mushi did not take Disney to court because they have too much class. Because Tezuka was a fan of Walt Disney and knew him personally briefly while they both were lived, and so it made the whole case more egregious. Because Disney's official position was, and I'll get more into this in a few minutes, was that not only did we not take this story, it's not even a coincidence. It is our story, and we've never even heard of anyone named Tezuka, even though several animators that worked on The Lion King were on record in journalism, and Matthew Broderick also all said they had watched Kimba as a child. So it's a good thing this didn't go to court because there's a possible chance Disney could have lost, but believe it or not. But anyway, they lost in the court of public opinion, at least with people who've seen Kimba. Now, if you haven't seen Kimba, you just kind of have to see it because, it's hard to say Kimba's better than The Lion King. It's not just better than The Lion King because it's plagiarized. It's better than The Lion King because, first of all, it is cult TV. It's not meant for the masses. It doesn't have dumbed down. It has a lot of messages. It's very didactic for children, but children that are much smarter.
It's heavy.
Yes, it is heavy. It's very heavy. And so people I've noticed who are into Kimba, because I wasn't into Kimba, like I said, until I was an adult. My ex-girlfriend grew up on it, back then, grew up on it in Gastonia, in syndication. And she said, oh, there's some Kimba cartoons at the Heroes Convention. Let's buy some. I'm like, okay. I'm like, that's the one everybody says to rip off The Lion King. This was when The Lion King was just left theaters. It's like 94. So I said, yeah, let's buy it. I fell in love with it immediately. And basically anybody who's seen Kimba, it has a mystical quality, and that's not an accident. There's a lot of mysticism in it, a lot of Asian philosophy, a lot of very radical philosophy. For one thing, our main character is a natural born predator, but he's by choice a vegetarian, and that becomes a whole storyline unto itself. That would never fly now. I mean, liberals and conservatives equally make fun of the liberals that aren't, make fun of vegans now. So I don't think a vegetarian cat would really, wow children, but that's okay. You know, apparently somebody in the 60s, you know, got it. And there's reasons for that, but I'll get into that another time. Maybe, hopefully during this talk. So what is Kimba? So it was a comic book in the early 50s. Like I said, it was called Jungle Tatai or Jungle Emperor. Started in 1950. It ran for about 5 years. It literally told the entire life story of this cub from his birth until his death. And his death was, he was the ascendant Lion King, and he had 2 children of his own, and he sacrificed his life very graphically for a comic book from 1954 that wasn't EC Comics to give his hide to his human companion. They were trapped on a mountain, and he said, we're going to die, you know, and so I'm going to impale myself on your knife. I want you to cut off my hide. I don't want you to use it to survive. And I plagiarized that plot point from my own comic book story, Snow Leopard, which was published in 2011 by the Comic Book Artists Guild. The only comic book story I've had published officially. And it's a lot of Kimba. It's kind of an homage to Kimba and quite a few other Asian sources. But similar thing happens to that, you know, that, you know, the father is dying. I won't survive, but here's my hide, you know. And the hide represents all kinds of things within Kimba. It's like a royal thing. It's like, it's a mantle, literally and figuratively, that he will become king. But again, you can probably already tell this is nothing like how the Lion King tells it. The Lion King bases its thing on pretty petty emotions like family jealousy and guilt, and just, you know, a lot of things that are just, most 5-year-olds already know, really. They don't need to really be taught, and they don't really need that obvious a lesson unless they're just, you know, and there's nothing wrong with being stupid, but, you know, education is a good thing, people. You know, it's not bad to learn things when you're a really young kid. So, you know, challenge your kids. Don't be afraid to, like, let them read. And, you know, with Kimba, it's a very emotional, it's not emotional like the Lion King. Lion King's emotional, like big lights, loud music, and Kimba comes up on top. Kimba's always on top. Now, Kimba is on top as a kid, as a couple. I mean, not Kimba, Simba. Simba always comes out on top. So that alone, right there, Simba, Kimba. The reason they named him Kimba was after the word Simba, because his name was Leo in Jungle Emperor. So Leo is still the name in Japan. And when the show played in Japan, it was called Jungle Emperor Leo. And there was a movie version made in the 1990s called Jungle Emperor Leo. And they made a Japanese reimagining, which I've not seen. That's a science fiction film made in 2007 called Jungle Emperor Leo, and I forgot the subtitle, but it's very hard to get a hold of. But with Kimba, you know, basically, yes, he's a talking animal. Of course, these are anthropomorphic animals. They live in Africa, so this is still the days of the Dark Continent. So there's a lot of this exoticism in the music and in the, you know, but there's really almost no racial elements in it at all. Really none that I can even think of. I mean, you should see black tribes once in a while, but it's never part of any plot line. It's nothing like Tarzan or anything of that nature. But it is like Tarzan in the sense that he has a destiny to kind of rule over his little domain of the jungle, and that he walks in 2 worlds, you know, because Kimba can speak with humans. He understands humans' languages. He knows what their culture's about. But he also knows, without a question, that humans are not to be trusted. That doesn't mean he doesn't have a human friend or 2 or 3 during the show. He does. He has one close human friend that he halfway grew up with. In the comic book, he was named Kinshi. In the TV show, he's called Roger Ranger.
Roger Ranger.
Yes. Yeah. And see, this is the thing for the show. NBC was like, you cannot start with this as a birth and go all the way till his death and sacrifice. We don't have, you know, this show isn't going to be on all these years. You can't do all this stuff. It's just too much. You can't do it in linear order, you know, because we want to jump right to where he's a cute cub. So that's NBC's contribution. I give them credit for that. That's a nice instinct. They have frozen him in amber to where when I watched the movie Jungle Emperor Leo, it was hard for me to see him as an adult who looked like his father, as a character.
Yeah,
it's hard for me to vibe.
Kind of a shocker.
It was weird. A lot of the charm of Kimba is the American voice actress Billy Lou Watt, who is a longtime voice actress and soap opera veteran. She was on Search for Tomorrow for 30 years. Well, she wasn't voiced on that. She actually acted on it. But she was the voice of Astro Boy originally. So like, let's get Billy to do Kimba. And it is a very kind of androgynous, childlike, innocent voice. It's very sweet. But Kimba learns how to be strong. I mean, to me, it's a perfect role model for any kid watching. He learns when you need to be sensitive and when you need to be tough and make decisions. And I personally was never taught the latter of those things. So I had no tools to survive in the world until I was like 20 years old. So no wonder I turned out a weirdo. So, but this is the kind of show that tells you, hey, it's okay to be different. There's a lot of times they encounter other animals that have some stigma around them, either like how they smell, how they look, some habit they have, there's some misunderstanding over territory. And as Sam was my editor on this article, and he yanked this thing that I sent him a bunch of photocopies because I was not on the internet at a regular period at that time. And so I sent him some things I printed out at my friend Dwayne Cochran's house, who is the producer of the show. So Dwayne and I were hanging out when I did this article. And these illustrations are from the original comic book. These were sent to me by Lisa Petrucci, the co-founder of Something Weird Video, who is probably the biggest Kimba fan I've ever met in my life.
Oh, wow.
So she sent me these because she knew I wasn't on the internet. She's like, just, hey, take these. Hey, make sure he copies them right. I'm like, okay. But so they start out when he's a cub, but it is his origin story. They didn't want to do them in chronological order. The network did not want to do them in chronological order. They randomly numbered them. Now, the whole story is originally written in chronological order, not just in the comics, but like the show Bible, the scripts were written in chronological order over the period of 3 years of Kimba, or 2 years of Kimba's life. So when he's a cub. And then the older parts where his origin is after the first episode are in flashback. That fills in other places he went, because his journey is essentially, his father is kind of like a lion that's very majestic. He's not the ruler of the jungle yet, though. That's the first thing you see in the first episode. And you see a little more of it in a flashback later. And he makes friends with Daniel Baboon, which is the Americanized version of the Baboon Advisor. And to be honest, Kimba fans are going to hate me, or Japanese Leo fans are going to hate me. I can't remember his Japanese name, but Daniel is kind of like the advisor. And yes, there is an equivalent voiced by Robert Guillaume in The Lion King. That's the character. That's the exact same character. And we're going to talk about Robert Guillaume during the show too. But this guy, Panja, is what he's called in the comic books, but Guy, this cat. I call men cats and cats guys. And his name's Caesar in the show. A little not too subtle, but Caesar, what he does is he basically raids the jungle and he frees other animals. He even frees farm animals, out into the wild. And he saves them from poachers and hunters. He's a fierce enemy of all hunters and all carnivores. And so, Kimba is not heavy-handed with his philosophy in the show, but his father is in flashbacks. So depending on how you like your didacticism, you can have it either way. Caesar pretty much more or less just kind of hates humans. He doesn't say that, but and they kill him. As with all things, as with many great leaders, especially in that time period. This is like 3 years after a great African leader, Patrice Lumumba, was assassinated. And I don't really think that's a coincidence either. I mean, I know Tezuka created his character first, but the Japanese seem really aware of what was going on in Africa when they made this show. And it seems as authentic as they were willing to make it within the context of a children's cartoon.
Almost kind of feels like a classic tragedy.
It is a tragedy. And that's another where Disney boiled it down to being Macbeth, but it's not Macbeth. It's not a familial squabble. This isn't a soap opera, and I love soap operas, but this is not a soap opera by any stretch. It is a saga that's basically about ideology, the ideology of how beings coexist with each other, regardless of species. And that's a pretty profound thing that we're still trying to figure out and undo the damage of, 50 years later, And so Kimba really is more timely than ever. In a lot of ways, and veganism is on the rise, which I never thought in America, which I'd never thought I'd see in my lifetime at all. But probably because more rich people do it, because it is expensive to eat better. I have a special diet now, so I can attest to that. But Caesar takes a mate, Snoween, and they're both like, she's kind of goldenish, and he's all white, of course, has a huge mane. And essentially, once he meets Daniel and starts meeting the other animals, and they find out what his agenda is, why he's running around doing all these crazy adventures. Daniel's like, we need you in our village with our animals, with our people, with people meaning all the animals that aren't humans. And of course, they can all talk to each other, And so Caesar agrees, and he takes his bride, and then she becomes pregnant with our protagonist, Kimba. And along the way, though, Caesar, while he's now the king of the jungle, he's also just duking it out with poachers right and left. So finally, they pretty much wipe him out. And it's, if I saw that at the intended age, I saw some cartoons that made me sad, but I think that would have it traumatizes me when I rewatch it after 20 times as an adult. It traumatizes me. A lot of it is Billy Lou Watt's voice, because she's so plaintive, because essentially Snoween and her cub get taken onto this prison ship to be sold off to another country from Africa. And she starts, that shows her grooming him. She's licking him just like cats do. And when he's 2 months old, she says, and now let me tell you about your father. And that's when you get into more flashbacks that precede what will be seen of him in the present. And he's all naive. And she's like, my father, and he's like so sweet. And so he has like these toys and wind up toys and shit they find on the boat. They're intended for the children of the crew members, but these mice smuggle them out and give them to Kimba to play with. And so Kimba and his mother, Kimba thinks it's like a crib, but it's really a big jail for his mom. And so finally, they hit rough waters, and his mom's like, I'm not going to make this journey. And if I do, it's going to be rough for me. So I want you to leave and go and swim back to Africa. And he's like, not without my mother. I tell you, that gets me every time. But he's so small, he can get through the bars. She can't. And so it's a tearjerker. It really is sad. And so he swims, and already at a young age, you see that he almost has a supernatural communion with all animals other than humans. For instance, he's not sure which way to go, so he starts swimming, and this flock of butterflies go above him, and they literally lead him to the dry land. And he's like, butterflies, land is near. And it's really beautifully filmed. I mean, there's the painting, I mean, the animation is simple, but the paintings and the colors and the music is almost kind of like Morricone-esque at times. And it's just very, it is exotic. I mean, it is different. It's not like Astro Boy where you kind of had a sci-fi fan in America could kind of relate to the Astro Boy story if you've seen enough movies about robots and sci-fi. But seeing Kimba really, I think, would have been an all-new experience for kids and maybe even adults when it came out. So he goes to the jungle and he meets Daniel. He meets all the animals. And what we learn over time through flashbacks is that on his way to finally meeting Daniel and them, when he gets onto land, he doesn't immediately go into the jungle. The first episode, if you watch it, it kind of sort of gives you that impression, but it's ambiguous. So they sneak into flashbacks later because they didn't want Tezuka to tell the whole thing in chronological order. So he lived in this place called Aden in Africa. I don't know if that's a real city, country or not. I can't remember. But he lives there for a few years. And he's befriended by a human named Kinshi, and who at the time is like a child, a teenager. He's a few years older than Kimba. So, but at the time Kimba's a cub, Kinshi, or Roger Ranger in English, he is like in his early 20s. And he becomes, you guessed it, a ranger. And he likes the jungle, and he's also against poachers. So you already get the idea. It's kind of like the race thing, not all white people are racists, like, even though you think that from watching Dolomite. But it's the same with this one. Not all humans are bad. So, and Kimba is young, and he's learning, and he's growing, and he concedes that because the human is the one who taught him how to speak. It's kind of like when Tarzan meets D'Arnaud in the jungle. In Tarzan adapts the novel and in the Greystoke film, and hardly in any other films. But D'Arnaud, played by Ian Holm in Greystoke, teaches him how to speak. And the first language he learns is French, because that's what D'Arnaud is, French. These are things that many Tarzan fans have no clue about, because that's not what we've been told Tarzan's about generally, unless we delve into that literature of Edgar Rice Burroughs and all that stuff. So, he learns it from a human, and how to speak to humans, and he has that ability to naturally do it. Not only does he like learn their language, but he can understand. In other words, the animals have to have him as an interpreter to humans. The other animals can't just speak unbidden to humans and understand each other. He can. He just has to, like any child, learn the alphabet, learn the words. So arguably, he learns human language before he learns, cat language. And so again, yeah, there are echoes of Tarzan in this for sure, and that kind of thing. And so when he makes it back to the jungle, that's when the story kind of lightens up a bit. And periodically they'll show flashbacks of Caesar, and they'll show flashbacks of Kimba in the city, because the animals are all like, tell us about the city, Kimba. Tell us about, yes, they really talk like that. Tell us about all the people, and he's like, okay. And then he gives like some story that's a flashback. And, there's always, like I said, there's always some kind of lesson, and it, it really is about tolerance. And for this to have been out in the 60s, that was a good time for really, it might be why a lot of older people that I know loved of that age who were alive, when it was on TV, love it so much. I don't know. I'm just conjecturing, because it was part of the Zeitgeist, really. Just like I said in the recent episode, Woman in the Dunes was inexplicably a hit in American theaters. And then you watch Woman in the Dunes now and you're like, how is that possible? But then you're like, it was the 60s. I mean, it makes sense. But same with Kimba. Kimba is very much a product of Kimba. The show is a product of its time, and I described it in the article as a Nippon Anglo hybrid, which it is. I mean, if NBC hadn't enforced the changes onto Kimba and certain things, it wouldn't have had the flavor that's made it endure. I mean, it would still been great because it was Tezuka, but I think under the weirdest circumstances, motivated by Disney, motivated by NBC, by financial things and ratings, they actually ended up kind of creating a cultural hybrid, a mishmash, and I think that makes it more timeless and more universal. And I think we're about to meet Justin Cotton. Those of you who haven't met Justin Cotton, he is one of our founders of this channel, and he lives in Australia, but he's not quite on yet. His name's there, so he'll be with us, right? He usually reads the introductions when I don't feel like it, because he has the cool accent. We don't. But so Kimba. So the show progresses just pretty much one dilemma after another. It's always built around conflict in the sense of, hey, Justin.
So, sorry, I was just filling around there trying to get my...
No problem.
No worries.
These people have been drooling with anticipation for you to show up, buddy. So I'm glad you're here. And I don't mean us. I mean the people watching. So, so the thing is, we're talking about Kimba the White Lion. That's our first show we're doing, Justin. And basically each episode is like a lesson, essentially. And it's usually, a lot of times it's about alienation. And usually it revolves around somebody that is an outsider, that's an animal that they want to learn how to communicate with, learn about them. You teach them something about yourself. If it's a human, it's usually an enemy. And then you have to learn get that lesson in your head that don't trust any humans. You can like some humans. Maybe you could trust Roger Ranger a little bit, but you can't, you definitely don't want to trust poachers and hunters. So, and the poachers and hunters in this show are unremittedly vile and evil. And they subtly give them in Japan, the murderer of Kimba's father was called Ham Egg, because let's like these cheesy, pardon the pun, names like that. But on the show, they kind of split him into two characters. One is named Viper Snakely. He couldn't be a bad guy. And the other's named Tubby. He couldn't be overweight. So, and there is an episode a few into the series where they come back and they try to Kimba doesn't know they're the ones who killed his father specifically. And so they try to trick Kimba, and it works. And it's one of Kimba's early lessons in naivety, in being manipulated, being suckered by people. And it does play into and is referenced in future episodes as to, when he's teaching their animals, it's like, remember, the humans aren't like automatically your friend. Most of them want to kill us and eat us, but don't judge all of them because of that, So, yeah, all kinds of weird things happen. Standout episodes, I don't know, they're all kind of like, like one, he meets a flyger. So a flyger is this mad scientist, fuses a tiger with bird's wings. And the flyger is like tormented. It's basically a show against animal experimentation. It's not very subtle by today's standards whatsoever. I mean, but animal rights weren't a thing in 1966. And the Flieger, the scientist almost talks Kimba into having the operation. He's like, "Wouldn't you want to have wings?" And so Kimba has this fantasy that he's flying.
Become a flying.
Yes, he's a flying. I just rewatched that episode the other day, so I was like really fresh. Kimba does that a lot. He zonks out in the middle of talking to the animals about trying to solve a problem and has some weird fantasy, and it either it's too good to be true or reality intrudes on it. And he's like, "Oh," and then he has to like solve the fucking problem, and hopefully he learns something from his little dream thing. So again, there's a lot of this mystical vision stuff that didn't start with the Lion King either. Kimba talks to his mother in the stars frequently, and it's really interesting. So this ran for 26 episode seasons. This is back when seasons of shows, even cartoons, were really a lot longer than they are now. And so there's 52 episodes. But after it went into syndication, like I said, they didn't make them be shown in chronological order. So once it went into syndication, it became even more confusing. So the one thing they managed to do is have Go White Lion, the first episode, The Origin, always aired first in every market. After that, it was just free for all. So, you're going to watch episodes where they're learning how to be vegetarians, and 3 episodes later, they're obviously carnivores. And you're like, what happened? Did they relapse? It's like, no, they're out of order. And so Kimba actually does. He creates a vegetarian restaurant in the second season. And, it's pretty realistic. The animals are pretty pissed off at him. They're like, our stomachs are hurting. We're meant to eat meat. So you've got the other side of the argument. If that's how you swing, you can go, hell yeah, fuck you, Kimba, and your vegetarianism. And I've had a lot of people who would say that. And Kimba is like, yes, but, and what I was getting to earlier, and I didn't quote, one of Kimba's most cherished principles is that animals should never prey on other animals. It's kind of like in the Planet of the Apes. Ape does not kill ape. So, in other words, the human is the one who's got all the petty, nasty emotions. So, see, they took this out of The Lion King because wouldn't that alienate a lot of people if somebody goes to see a show and the kid's like, "Daddy, why are all humans bad?" If you just don't show humans, then you have nothing to criticize. So it has to become a soap opera and an internecine melodrama in order to generate artificial conflict that was not in the original material. Which the conflict in the original material is, yes, it's animals versus humans, but it's also animals versus animals versus their own baser instincts, things that they were hardwired to do, like eat meat, like you're a cat. I mean,
I feel like the danger of starvation was always something that hung over the show.
It was. They tried to start a farm, and one time they had a locust invasion, and the locusts not so subtly dispersed, and then they reconvened and they made a face of death skull.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa! Again, when I first saw this, I was like, what did kids think of this? There's no resolution in the series because it only gets up to his adolescence. But when the show ended, they had the restaurant. They had managed to stave away starvation seemingly indefinitely. They had learned to coexist. They had a few human friends. They had several human enemies. And referring back to what I said earlier, yes, the message, especially during the 60s, is yes, not all humans are bad. Like not all white people are racists. But like in a blaxploitation movie, there may be some nice white people in the movie, but it's not their movie, and most of them are like going to try to kill you. And it's same with cops, same with Kimba. It's like, yes, he preaches this stuff, and it's true, and it's very accepting and inclusive. But almost every human they depict is an absolute piece of vile shit, And they don't. There's no subtlety whatsoever. Like I'd say 90% of the human characters hate animals with this almost irrational, not just to eat or hunt, but it's like it's a vendetta. It's like they're telling us that all humans are born wanting to kill animals. Now I don't know if that's true. I don't personally agree one way or another. I don't have a skin in that game. I mean, I guess I do being a human, but and a vegetarian, but I feel like it's an exaggeration to make a point, just like all the racist cops in Sweet Sweetback, or to make a point. I don't think Ben Peebles really believed literally this is exactly everyone's reality. It's his truth. And I think in Kimba, it's the truth of their community is that, yes, they're in Africa, they're wild animals. So yeah, they could be shot any second. So, and I think, I don't know, you could almost make a racial allegory to living and growing up in a ghetto, and having that fear of what we talked about in the Candyman session, which should be up by now, but for us has only been recently. Kaylin talked about the fact that a lot of mothers, they worry about their children growing up, and that's like a whole socio-cultural, that's like a whole part of their psyche now. And I've talked to Black women who have told that to me themselves. They're like, I'm doing the best I can, but he probably won't live very long out on his own, but I've done what I can do. Unless things change,
and it's really tragic. Like Black parents I know, like my friends who have kids, have talked about how like there's the talk that they have to give their children, especially boys, and it's really, really depressing, that this is a thing that's necessary, but it's like this is how people are going to perceive you. You can be the sweetest, most kind, friendly, safe person, and people are still going to perceive you as a threat. So that's the world that we live in.
It is.
And you have to do what you have to do to keep yourself safe, even if it's ridiculous. And that's something that just really, it bugs the hell out of me, for one thing. And another, just, you see this come up in media like that, like all the time.
And see, that's where Saturday morning cartoons, and now I can't speak for Japan, obviously they were different. But in America, once you got through the 60s, I mean, really Saturday morning cartoons and syndicated cartoons for children, they stopped showing, and Disney is the biggest offender because they made the most money and distributed the most widely of this kind of material, and still are, is that they took away the consequences of lessons. KIMBA, I think, really has taken its circumstances. It already had very elevated source material, but its corporate circumstances and its distribution among English-speaking people and Americans, and it became timeless by just almost accidentally, but not mega hit. It's always been a cult TV show, and it always will, because Disney silenced it and went to legal extremes to try to silence it in the 90s. Because they didn't want to have a lawsuit that they could possibly lose. The Japanese viewpoint on this, so I'll go get into the controversy now. I talked about the show. The controversy basically is that if you pick the Lion King apart, all the plot points and all the characters are in KIMBA. So the only characters that aren't in the original source material, the only characters in the Lion King that are not in Tezuka or in this case, Imi Ichi Yamamoto, who directed and co-wrote the entire series. We'll get back to him too, very important. He directed Astro Boy too, but he also directed a major cult movie that's the polar opposite of KIMBA. I'm not going to cover the movie, but I'd like to mention it in a minute. But Yamamoto and Tezuka, they, what they were doing, I don't know how to put it, everything that's endemic to them ended up in the Lion King except the humans. And then Lion King added Timon and Pumbaa because they wanted the animators, not the producers, because from what I've understood, the producers were furious about this, but since it made money, they didn't care. They weren't happy that they had a homosexual pair of animals in their movie. But sure, plenty of the animators of that show were queer. So, like Timon and Pumbaa. And Timon and Pumbaa, to me, are the only characters, not only are they only the original characters, they're the only ones to me that have any entertainment value. I know there are people probably on this podcast right now watching or in this seat that don't agree with me. But as far as bad movies go, like when I think a bad movie's bad, Lion King's in my top 5. It's virtually unwatchable. And I've sat through it twice. To me, it's painful to watch. It's just so cloying and so beating you over the head. I'm like, hold on, keep that brick away, please. I get it. He's the Messiah. I get it. Ooh, he's the Messiah. Now, I will say in KIMBA, they do not hold him up as a cub with the sun shining and hosannas, because they know such a thing as like, he's going to develop into the king. And there's a funny line in The Lion King that's unintentionally ironic. Because, Simba really has a snotty attitude, which KIMBA doesn't.
Yeah.
KIMBA's like a model of modesty and kindness. Simba's kind of a prick. He's entitled. He knows he's going to be the king and the savior of all animals. And to Disney, that's what imperialism is. That's what their brand is about. is by elevating those kind of narratives and
Yep.
sidelining other narratives. It wouldn't be so bad if they represented all narratives. Again, I will give Marvel credit for giving Disney a lot of diversity they did not have previously. Even the new Star Wars shows, I'll give them credit for that too. They're making a real effort at that. I don't see it in Disney's mainstream cartoons, but they don't make many anymore. They kind of rehash the same thing over and over for their movies. But with like a Lion King, it was a movie, it was a play, then it was a CGI movie, going to be a live action movie. It's endless, and that's where the art commerce thing comes in. And what's funny is when I read this article, it was a staunchly anti-Disney article. Now this, of course, was many years before Disney owned properties that I'm a fan of. So when this was published, the only thing Disney did that I liked at all was maybe I had fond memories of seeing Dumbo in the theater at age 5. I saw it in the same theater that I saw 2001: Space Odyssey in at age 5. Same year. I love them both. Didn't understand either one of them. But Disney Disney, when they made The Lion King, they were in the process of buying Miramax. So they still were on the cusp of doing any material that was remotely adult. And when they did do adult-ish movies in the 80s, not only did the movies do badly financially, I don't blame the movies because they're almost, in my opinion, I don't know if y'all agree, I love almost every one of those movies. I mean, The Black Hole's good, Return to Oz, I love, The Watcher in the Woods. They made a whole passel of them, and Disney was ashamed of them. And it's kind of how Kevin Feige acted about the Netflix Marvel shows. It's which I don't think that was, I was given information by Keith on our last show we shot of X-Men. He dug into this, and he doesn't think Kevin Feige's as big a Puritan as he comes across. He thinks it's pretty much because he just wanted control. He didn't mind having adult Marvel superhero, but Disney did mind it until they started making money, So it's kind of like Disney hadn't just begun to dip its toe. And so when they first did in the 80s, Something Wicked the Way It Comes, it's dark, it's weird. They wouldn't promote these movies. They let them sink without a trace. They let the videos go out of print. They let the DVDs go out of print. But they still have never embraced those movies, really. I mean, now other labels have to buy those movies. Like, I have Return to Oz on Blu-ray, but man, it was a journey, and it wasn't put out by Disney. It was put out by Anchor Bay, and then Anchor Bay went out of print. And then it was kind of like a bidding war because it's like somebody needs to get this before Disney can get it and bury it, like literally what they call moratorium, which means place where something goes to die, and that's what they do. They pull them for financial reasons. I don't know how many people know this. And then they put them back out on the market. Like, we're having a calculated re-release of Snow White because we've created X amount of expectation and impressions. It's all through it's all about advertising. It's not about
that has been pissing
storytelling.
me off since I was a small child,
Yeah,
and
me too.
saw all of the ads that were just get it before it goes back into the Disney vault on VHS.
So you grew up
and I'm
in
just
the
why is
generation
it
where that
going
was
back into a vault?
Yeah, I'm like, what
no.
vault? What the fuck is this vault?
Right.
First time I went to a
Yeah.
video store and I asked about a horror movie, and they were like, I'm sorry, that title is on moratorium. I'm like, I know what moratorium means, but you mean it's like dead? They're like, no, it's on, it'll never come, it's going to come back. It's basically, it's dead indefinitely until there's a corporate decision otherwise.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
the whole false scarcity thing, artificial scarcity. It's
Right.
oh, you can't have this now. We're not making more copies of it because we want to drive up the value so that we can do something big in 5 to 10 or 20 or more years. And it's just
Yeah.
why? Stop.
And like many narratives right now, the internet has taken the piss, so to speak, out of that.
Yeah.
Because now we know
Good.
having availability at anything we ever want to see does not make these companies go out of business.
No, definitely.
Far from it, because there is cross-pollination and people. But I have the entire set, which I'm not going to sell. That's on Blu-ray. I watched it. On DVD. It's not on Blu-ray. I watched it this week, or I had it running when I wasn't watching it. It was kind of ambient, and it'd been a while since I'd heard that music, heard those voices, and it's one of those things that sticks with you because I think it was created and written and made on the level of a child in a good way, like a primal way, to where it's it is didactic but not heavy-handed. It is resonant with living and growing and aging, no matter what age you are. It is about basic life lessons that people really need to learn. That I hate that American animation decided, no, we can't do this anymore.
Yeah, man, Tezca wasn't screwing around.
No, he wasn't. He had a lot to
Um,
say, you know. He had some
One
great.
thing,
Good.
no, I'm sorry.
No, I want
And
to hear
yeah,
you.
I promise I'm not going to bog it down.
Hey,
One
you've
thing,
seen it too, so I'm eager to hear your views.
well, one thing that always nailed me, even when I was 5 or 6 years old and watching this show,
Wow.
and I figured this out even then. I didn't really have the words to voice it, but it was probably how much NBC kind of messed things up in translation, because you would have instances where you'd have a character die, and it'd be like the American dub would have it something like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go over here and rest. Yeah, I'm just gonna lie down here in the sand." And then a shadow would fall over them. And
Right.
everybody, if you were watching, you knew exactly what had
Oh
happened.
yeah, I knew they died, but I saw them when I was
Yeah.
an adult. I mean, I don't know what I would have thought as a kid.
Oh, that is what I thought as a kid.
Oh well, see,
But,
you were a sharp cookie there, man.
yeah.
The show was made for a kid like you.
Yeah. Yeah, people wonder why I've become such the happy customer I am.
Exactly.
But
See, we're shaped by all this corrupt media that's just turned us into these weirdos. So
but that's all.
no, that's great. I appreciate that. And I highly recommend Kimba. I think even if you love The Lion King, as long as you're not a partisan for Disney or The Lion King, you'll love Kimba.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kimba is an unappreciated character and show, so I highly recommend it. So I'm not going to go any further. I could literally talk all night about this, but I think you get the point.
Could you?
You know I
I
could.
can tell. No, you can tell this is something near and dear to your heart. So
It's almost, well, no, actually it's more near to me than Twin Peaks is, really. I'm on an emotional level. Now on a cerebral level, Twin Peaks kind of trumps the other shows, but
Yeah, it's good.
Hi, this is Henry Covert, and this has been Deep Images. Hope you enjoyed today's segment, and we will be back soon to continue our discussion on Cult TV. Feel free to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for the ending credits and the beautiful music of Ghost of Day, and thank you for watching.